Thanks for sticking around. So I'm Ken Wincko, Senior Vice President of Global Product Solutions at Dun Bradstreet. And my team is responsible for working with our clients worldwide and advising them on how they can use data and analytics to drive better business outcomes by aligning it with their technology strategy, their business strategy, and their data and analytics strategy. And what's actually interesting is, so we've been hearing, you heard Anthony talk, and I mean, that guy is brilliant. So, he's really talking around the data and analytics. How do you manage all this information, utilize it? I'm going to be actually talking from the other side of the fence, from the business side. Because ultimately, whether you're internal and you're serving your business clients, right? So the CMO or the CFO, whatever, or you're serving an external client, it's really about how do you help them get what they need out of the data and analytics. So that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. So we sat with CIOs, CMOs, CFOs over the last 3 months in roundtables, and we talked to them about how well they think their company is doing in utilizing data and analytics, number one. Number two, how is that impacting their particular pieces of the organization? So for a CFO or for a CMO, et cetera. And what's actually kind of interesting, and I've seen a lot of research on this, whether it's from Gartner, or Forrester, or whomever, is that the needs are converging. And I'm going to go through these and how I mean by that. So big data. So if you look at it from a CIO's perspective, obviously they're looking at how to gain the greater insights out of the information, how to manage that. But you know what? The CFO wants to know how much they should be investing in big data initiatives overall. The CMO is saying, well, what can I really get out of that? How can I create new innovative solutions? How can I determine customer needs and wants? How do I do that? So we heard that consistently. Number two, this isn't a surprise. We have, a global still recession, a lot of economic uncertainty. Both US we're coming out of. You have China slowing down. You have Europe, obviously, that's in a slump. So there's a lot of hesitancy among all groups in investing. And that's a problem because when you look at Forrester actually did a study, and they said, how many of you think that big data is important? So it was like 80% said big data is important. And then they asked the CFO, well, how much are you willing to invest? How many of you are willing to invest heavily in big data? And only 24% said they were willing to do that. So there's a delta. So that's why the economic uncertainty is an issue. Disruptive technology. So every single firm we talked to, and I don't care if it was IBM or it was Nielsen in media and entertainment or in healthcare industry, if it was Pfizer, every single one is worried about new disruptive technology. And they're worried about these startups and how it's going to change their go-to-market models. They're looking at how do we innovate? What do we have to do? What are our customers going to say? So that's a big problem as well. And then finally, this whole idea of globalization. So Anthony talked about that and translation, et cetera, et cetera. But if you look at the deregulation of markets, company after company is looking at not just necessarily acquiring new customers globally, but looking for new partners, joint ventures, companies to acquire to go into new markets. And so these executives that we talked to, these were the 4 core issues. So how does this all relate to data and analytics in the business world, in the business side? Well, what's actually kind of interesting, so Ray Wong is going to be speaking after me, and so Ray shared this with us. So what's actually interesting is that in the past, data was the purview of the IT or operations, data management professionals. And so was structured data, and then now unstructured, semi-structured, et cetera. And then it kind of moved along to information orchestration. How do we get more value and insight out of that? And what's interesting is now we're crossing the line because of all these business pressures that we just talked to, that the business executives are now driving the conversation. So the CFOs and the CMOs and the chief sales revenue officers, line of business, you see above the line, they want insight. They don't want data. They want to get predictive. So this is where obviously analytics come into play. But what they really want to get to is prescriptive. What is my next course of action? Should I not take an action? Is that the best course of action? So it's really, really interesting, and I think many of you have probably heard. So Gartner estimates that in 5 years, CMOs are going to spend more on technology than CIOs. So there's a big shift. But the problem is that business executives, this is still new territory for them, right? I was in a call this morning, the business executive, and there was somebody presenting from the analytics team. And they were talking about, we're doing some predictive analytics on our marketing campaigns, our sales campaigns. So this analyst is talking through the model. This executive is like, I don't understand where you're going with this. All I want to know is, what's the incremental of this test? Is it driving? Is this valid? How does this benchmark compare to other models you've used in the past? That's what she asked. So it's really this sense of, okay, well, how do we get the business side and the IT side, information professionals, data scientists, all working from the same page? So you can see here, the number one issue, number one priority for business executives is driving improved business performance from data and analytics. So when the CMO is talking to the CIO, they're saying, I want you to invest in technology. I want you to invest in big data because I want to better understand those needs and wants, sentiment analysis, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, I need those tools. I need that insight. What's actually interesting, though, Forrester did another study separate from this one that said, number one challenge in this whole space, same thing, which is business performance. We can't tie today. It's very difficult for companies to tie together the data and analytics and how it's driving the performance. Number two, actually, on that list was data integration, which we'll get to in a second. But it just shows that, yes, people are investing heavily. And this actually has come up in this survey for the last 3 or 4 years. Number one priority. That's where people are investing. But this is a research study from HBR, from Harvard Business Review. It shows that 85% of business executives say they think information is a strategic asset. You say to yourself, of course, everybody knows that. But only 36% say that their teams are utilizing it effectively. So there's a huge, huge gap. So, I'm not sure if you saw this movie, Lost in Translation. Bill Murray, love Bill Murray. So why did I choose this? Well, in many ways, we are lost in translation right now, right? And we say that from the vendor side, you can say that from a customer side, I mean, across the business. So I work with analytics teams, I work with the sales team, finance team, et cetera, et cetera. So what are some of these core issues? Well, there's soft issues, what I would say, so culture, for example, like at Dun Bradstreet. We're trying to become much, much more predictive in using analytics, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, after all, that's our business. But the question is, there's still a lot of test and learn. What's working, what's not working? So there's a cultural issue around patience. So the sales team is saying, I need sales revenue tomorrow. Today, ideally, or yesterday. But the patience to say, like, okay, well, let's keep driving towards this isn't necessarily always there. And I'm sure many of you find that yourselves when you're talking to whether it's your clients or internally. There's also other issues. Some companies don't have data governance set up. So key business leaders with key IT leaders, data management, all working from the same team. That's definitely a best practice. It sounds very logical, but a lot of companies don't do that. So that's another softer issue that you can pretty quickly address. So then it comes to the point where another soft issue is, well, how do you start prioritizing all these initiatives? So where you can get your biggest bang for your buck, which is around measurement. And we're going to get more into that in a second. Now, there's some other issues that are really more technology related around this whole issue around data and analytics and why we're not able to drive the performance that we're really looking for. So number one is integration across systems. Number one in a survey by Forrester. That's number one challenge in implementing analytics software. Sorry, computer world. But the point here is that if you look at it from the functional standpoint, so I'm a former marketer, now I'm on the product side. So anybody know how many systems a typical marketing team needs to utilize to get a campaign out the door? Any idea? Guess? 5 to 6 on average. 5 to 6 different systems to get a campaign out the door. So you're talking about marketing automation, CRM, whatever it is, your digital platform, Adobe, whatever it is. How are you connecting the dots across all those systems? How are you making sure that you've got the right customer insight that you're delivering across those systems? That's just the marketing and sales side. Same thing's happening in supply chain, finance, et cetera. So data proliferation. We all know this. This is the whole big data thing. But it's, as Anthony talked about, it's not just the volume, the variety, it's the velocity, it's all of these challenges. But when you look at this Forrester research study, it says the #1 issue in preventing organizations from getting better results is multiple sources. So how do you get the relevant context? And when we sat down with CMOs and we sat down with CFOs, that's a huge problem for them. It's not that every single one of them said, quote unquote, Ken, we have enough information. We don't need that. What we need is, I want to get rid of some of it actually. I want to nail it down to the very narrow set of things that are going to be the key business drivers that are going to help me make the right decisions for whatever I want to do. And that's a big, big problem. So how do you really get that called down into that relevant set of insight? Finally, accessibility. So we did a study with Forrester last summer this is just on the sales side. So 70% of sales managers said they needed all of the information around their prospects and buyers integrated right there in their CRM. They wanted mobile, everything. But only 1/3 of the teams were actually doing that. So once again, it's a best practice. A lot of companies just don't think about it. It's an afterthought. They say, you know what, CRM, the solution is going to solve the problem. No. They say, okay, we got CRM, we're going to implement marketing automation. That will help solve the problem. No. It's a combination of things. You know, so you're doing social, great. You got a digital, so you're trying to do digital campaigns, et cetera, et cetera. Well, you're doing lead form optimization around those leads. How are you scoring those leads? How are you getting greater intelligence around those leads than just what you get in a form? So those are the kinds of things. Accessibility, making it consumable, is a core issue. And Anthony talked about it. So he gave that stat around, okay, there's going to be a lack of data scientists. Now, I'm not a data scientist, and I can tell you that there are a lot of people in the organization. I love data. I work for a data company, data and analytics company. Now, that being said, that's why this accessibility is so important. If you can make it consumable and deliver it right within the workflows where everybody's going and just pull that out into a mobile app or whatever it is, very, very critical. So it's really about 3 major steps. One is integrating across your enterprise, data and analytics. So it's really getting a multi-dimensional view of your business partners, your suppliers, that was pretty shocking, I guess, customers, et cetera. And so why do I say that, this multi-dimensional view? And why does it have to be across the enterprise? So why does your ERP need to be connected to your supply chain software, to your marketing automation software, to your CRM? Why? It's the convergence of needs that we just talked about. So what do I mean by that? Specifically, as an example, your CFO is looking at operating cash flow. That's what he or she is thinking about every single day, all day. And they're looking at, how do we manage our receivables? How do we optimize? How do we get orders flowing through more quickly, et cetera? So what if you had your risk pre-screen, right, going into your CRM so that your sales reps aren't going after people who your credit department aren't going to approve? How do you focus in on the right people that aren't paying as quickly as you want? How do you not know that that person that you're talking to, your sales rep is talking to right now, is not a business partner, a key business partner for you? And maybe they're just not aware. Or they're supplier, too. So when you think about this whole ecosystem, I mean, we're really in a networked economy. So this whole issue of connecting these systems is step 1. Step 2 is the multiple sources of information. So how do you gather all of this in one place and then finally deliver that into an application wherever you need it, whenever you need it, as fast as you can get it? So what we did is we talked to these CIOs, CFOs, CMOs, and we said to them, okay, what are your list of challenges? So we talked through some of those things. We validated that through our own primary research. And then we started talking about best practices. And I'm going to share with you a couple of these. These are just off the top, just a couple of examples. And I think one of the important things for us to think about is dynamic delivery. So if you were in the first panel, Andy Bird from Data.com talked about use cases. So that's what these are. I'm going to take you through them right now. And these are use cases specific to the business audience that can be delivered with a micro app and real-time streaming that your business teams can use to make better and faster decisions. So I'm just going to walk through a couple examples. So, deal making. Can anybody tell me what CFO said, what percentage of CFOs said they did not achieve their results from mergers and acquisitions? Not you. Anybody? 70%. 70% of CFOs said when they acquire a company, their acquisition did not achieve the business results that they want. Why? This diligence process, so for those of you familiar, many of you are, with that whole process, is fairly complex. It's hard to get a lot of insight around the people that you're trying to do business with. So you're looking at acquisition or joint venture or whatever it might be. Do you know if there's been any fraud? Do you know if there's any compliance issues? Do you know if there's a minority stake from one of your competitors or something? Who knows? There's a whole host of issues. Anthony talked about that. So that's one example of this list just from the finance side. And then once again, how do you streamline this financial decision making? So connecting your ERP with your supply chain, how do you improve the order management process so that you don't have an invoice sitting with the wrong address that's not getting billed properly? We actually have a client who had over 3,000 invoices sitting that were delivered to the wrong address. Can you imagine that? Now let's say you resend them and we're going to collect on all those. Just think about the time that was wasted in terms of time to value of money. It's incredible on 3,000 plus invoices. So that's an example of that. Now from the operations standpoint, so we're all competing on supply chains, particularly in the manufacturing side, obviously. So how do you determine where those low-cost suppliers are? Are they reliable globally, et cetera? If you look at the supplier and distributor performance, so if you look at the reporting that goes on, a lot of it's standards-based. So they make assumptions, and they stick for a month or a quarterly, et cetera, but how can you get to activity-based costing? So a true value or true measure of what your supply chain looks like. For the marketing side, this is something that we're doing at Dun Bradstreet, customer modeling. So how do you actually implement propensity models to target not just, okay, I want to generate 1,000 leads. Sales teams don't want that anymore. They want the 5 best leads that they know that they can close in whatever time frame you're looking for. It's the quality versus the quantity. And the customer modeling is difficult to do on your own in some cases. You got to there's a lot of iterative processing, making sure your models are up to date, et cetera, but there's tools to be able to do that. Marketing automation, how do you utilize that intelligence, whether it's digital intelligence, could be vertical specific, social, and pulling that in so that when you're doing lead scoring and routing, do you want to send it to your marketing team for marketing automation? Do you want to send it to your sales team based on propensity? Digital intelligence, lead form optimization, all the same thing. So just getting a greater view and saying before I route a lead, I'm going to make sure I know the right place to route it and how I want to interact with that customer, what the right message is going to be. And then from the sales and service side, if you look at things as simple as territory management, huge problem for many organizations. So I was on the plane and I was sitting next to a sales executive from Oracle. And he's talking to me about, I said, well, how are things going with your sales and territory? He's on the software side, and he said, the problem is we've got all these different business units that are going after the same people. It's so inefficient, our customers confused, they're not happy with our customer experience. So, that's a big problem. So territory management is something very difficult to solve, and if you don't have the right business identification to be able to say and categorize and segment based off of firmographic information, then you're not going to be able to do the proper territory management. You're not going to be able to do account planning. A lot of people do account planning on a forecast basis when they could be doing it on an opportunity basis. What I mean by that is you can't just assume, okay, well, the company is growing at 20% and you say, you know what, our target for this account is 5% this year. Why? Could you be growing that account at 15% or 20%? Most companies aren't doing that. Buyer intelligence, how do you map your contacts within a particular account. Who are truly the key influencers and decision makers within an account, and what is their activity? Do you have social connections? Do you have connections within your organization can open up those doors with those buyers? So those are some of the things that with the right intelligence you can do. So I'm going to share a couple of metrics with you. So what does this really mean? So ultimately, we talked about speaking the right language and getting lost in translation. Well, many data management departments, et cetera, speak in terms of data quality, or they speak in terms of the analytic models, et cetera, but it really's got to be about the business results. So the CMO doesn't speak in Boolean algorithms. They speak in terms of ROI. They look at response rate, et cetera. So you have to be able to accurately translate what impact you're going to have. And it's easier said than done. But just look at some of these numbers. So on the supply side and the finance side, if you could decrease your write-offs 5 to 10%, or your vendor costs 10 to 20%, or on the sales and marketing side, your close rate 2 to 5%, or your retention rate 4 to 5%. Incredible numbers. And I know that from working with our clients. We saw people who were integrating data inside their CRM and marketing automation, so are best in class, are twice as likely to integrate across multiple systems. And we saw actually these clients that we surveyed, actually 15% shorter sales cycles, 30% higher retention. Just think about that. Those are huge numbers. Think of the power of 1%. So Harvard Business Review, they did their own study. So people who use data-driven decision-making, data analytics, are 5% more productive and 6% more profitable. So what we're doing, at least at D&B, just to let you know, so we have a platform called D&B Direct, which is an API web services platform that takes all of our data, so financial analytics, industry research, external data sources, like wealth information, could be healthcare data, et cetera, and we can bring that into any device or platform. So whether you are an end customer and you would like to know more about how we can help you with that, or you're a partner, a potential partner, and you have a data and analytics platform that we could potentially work together, we're happy to talk to you. So I'll be in the back later. Thank you very much for your time, and if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer anything.